afternoon, everyone. My name is Kaylyn. Today I'll be talking to you about chemistry from the perspective of a science student. So basically it'll be about Bachelor of Science in the Department of Chemistry. I'll also be talking about what's after the bachelor's, so like the master's, the PhD, and also the jobs as well. So first off, who am I? I'm Kaylyn. I am currently a second year PhD student with SQ and UBC, mostly UBC. I graduated from my bachelor's in 2013, and prior to that, I graduated from Mercer in 2009. And things that I like to do is because I do a sport. It's called kendo, which is like a martial art with swords. I also like playing piano, and I also love listening to music. That's me. So, what's chemistry? What do you guys know? What would you say is like a term, or how would you define chemistry? Does anyone? Yeah, matter. Matter? Okay. Anyone else? Molecules. Okay. That's not well. So that's actually better than what I expected people to know. Because generally people know chemistry through media as and explosions and being crazy. So, well, chemistry isn't only those three things, it's a whole bunch of things. So, you guys kind of mentioned the definition of chemistry is a branch of physical sciences that studies the composition, structure, properties, and changes of matter. So, it's a really broad definition, and it's not just what you see on TV. It's actually a lot of things. So this is a summary of different aspects in chemistry. So I've broken it down into 4 aspects. This isn't, it's definitely not just limited to this, but these are the major parts of chemistry. So I'll just be talking about the different parts and like how they apply to our whole society. So the first part is organic and inorganic chemistry. So that's basically where scientists kind of go out there and look, for example, at like a tree and like extract compounds from it. And then the part that chemists do is they try to remake that through different methods. So versus extracting it from like a tree, for example, you like take different building blocks, put them together, and make a new compound out of it that's similar or has similar properties. And inorganic chemistry kind of falls under that category, so it's not as limited to just living like compounds that you find in living organisms. It's also stuff that you can find like in the ground, in like or in rocks and minerals and whatnot. Okay? So yeah, so that's organic and inorganic chemistry. The next part is physical chemistry. So physical chemistry has a lot of its uses in, I would say, chemical engineering. So for example, in chemical equation, when you have A plus B equals to C, yes, organic chemistry deals with what is A and what is B and what is C, but physical chemistry more deals with how much heat is being produced when C is produced, or like how much of A is necessary to react with how much B. So that's physical chemistry. You see this a lot in terms of how chemical engineers sort of build reactors for factories and whatnot. And also, I just wanted to bring up this application in particular, fuel cell, which is which, if you guys know, it's a zero emission fuel source. And essentially, physical chemists kind of look at this as a whole and try to figure out exactly how they can make this whole system more efficient. So that's physical chemistry. And another aspect of chemistry is called analytical chemistry. So that's dealing with the study of how much of a certain substance is inside like a given object. So like, for example, what kind of chemicals are inside this table, or like if you want to go to an ocean and test how much pollutants there are, you're not just going to like grab it and like stare at it and assume that you will know what's inside, right? You have to use different devices and whatnot. So the main application of analytical chemistry would be, if you know anyone who's diabetic, they have to have a glucose meter, so that just tests how much sugar is in their blood at the moment. Finally, the last aspect of chemistry that's highlighted here is materials chemistry. So that's essentially where, kind of similar to organic chemistry, where you are looking at different chemicals that are out there and kind of building together new sort of structures. So here I have a picture of created, or that material had to be made by material chemists back in the past. So that's the entirety of chemistry. The interesting about chemistry is that it's such a central science that it branches into physics and into biology, and it's not just one thing. Okay? So I personally don't do all like aspects of chemistry. That would be a little bit crazy. I'm sort of I'm a physical chemist working on a problem that applies to analytical chemistry. So essentially, I put DNA on gold, and that has applications for biosensors. So I just have a slide here of exactly what biosensors are. Biosensors are typically medical devices that diagnose diseases and whatnot based on certain chemicals that appear when you have a certain disease. So here you can see is a surface with some recognition molecules here. It's attached to a something that will tell whether you have a signal or not. So what happens is when your molecule of interest kind of makes contact with your surface, a signal will appear, and that will determine whether or not you have a certain disease or not. So essentially in my lab, we have this inverted microscope set up where we look at these gold beads. And so these are essentially just gold wires. We flame up a butane torch and it makes a really, really small bead at the bottom. And the interesting thing is that if you look at it under a microscope, it's not exactly just spherical. There's actually different little flat spots you can see here. And when you put fluorescent DNA on top, you can see that it doesn't form a smooth, just only smooth pattern. Okay? So my research kind of deals with reason, or how do we control this so that how do we control it such that we can get more DNA on every single part of the surface rather than only on these select spots? And that would help in biosensors because when you make these devices, if you just throw stuff on there, how do you know whether it's going to be uniform or not? So that's my research. And I don't want to bore you too long about my research, so I'm just going to talk about what is important for you to be a scientist. And through my experience, I think definitely being a scientist is really important. So there are different things that you have to have in order to be a good scientist. You need to be patient for once. So when you're doing research, typically you're the only person who's doing this research. It's not going to be as straightforward as you want it to be. So it ends up you have to be patient. You have to wait for the results. The answer's not going to be always in front of you. And you have to be curious. You have to find out why things are working. If you see something, you observe something in your experiments, you kind of have to look deeper into it. You can't just ignore it. So that's really important. And I think it's important also to be self-motivated because it's not very often that people tell you, oh, you're doing a good job, keep going. Sometimes when you're doing research, people won't appreciate what you do. And it's kind of hard because people don't see a direct application of it into the future. So you have to self-motivate yourself and tell yourself that you have to keep going. You have to get to that goal that's really far ahead. Okay? Another thing is you have to be cooperative. So when you're a scientist, yes, you're supposed to be knowledgeable and whatnot, but there are other people who are also scientists who can offer their input and their ideas to your project. And it's really important for you to gain that to be able to listen to other people's ideas so that they can input and bring a new perspective to your project. And finally, I think it's important for scientists to be constantly looking for an alternative approach. So there's going to be a lot of dead ends that occur in research because it's the first time you probably are that somebody is doing whatever you're doing, right? So if you're going to be hitting dead ends all the time, you should not just be hitting the dead end and just not looking around what you're going to do. You have to go find another alternative solution, going around the problem to get to what you need to find. Okay? So being a scientist is a little long down the road. You guys are high school students. More important thing, right? I guess more immediate think about is university. So these are some things that when I was in my bachelor's, these are some tips that I would advise to anyone. So the main thing is know yourself, know your strengths and your weaknesses. Essentially, for you to succeed, you can't do it without knowing who you are, okay? And the most important thing is marks do not matter. I have to stress this so much because I know a lot of people who say, oh, I have to get 90% in order to get to here. Well, yes, it is true that marks are like a first impressions for what people will see when you apply for med school or like law school or anything like grad school as well. I would say that it's more important to focus on trying to understand how you study, how are you learning, how do you gain more knowledge. Therefore, you can ace the exam, and therefore you get higher marks. I think that's really important. I really want to stress that. And thirdly, it's really important in university to time manage. It's very easy to get distracted and like just sit there and not, so it's really important that you just don't sit there and waste time because every minute counts, okay? But finally, it's important to have friends and have fun. So UBC isn't only a place where you just come here and study and that's the only thing you do. There's a lot of clubs at UBC. I joined the Chemical Club here as well. I was an executive member at the Undergraduate Chemistry Society. So that allowed me to not only focus on my studies, but also about like organizing activities and like how to basically be more of a team player. Because honestly, sometimes courses are not the best place to be, or it's not the only place where you can be part of a team. And so with that, thank you all for standing with me on this, or sitting here